The collapse of the German economy and its consequences, especially deeply the economic crisis, hit Germany. Jung's plan, adopted in June 1929, somewhat softened the conditions of the previous Dawes plan, but he certainly was a huge burden for Germany. In economic terms, the country depended on great powers. In fact, reparations themselves were paid by her by attracting foreign capital, and when the crisis erupted, France and other powers, worried about the unstable political situation in Germany, withdrew their investments from there. This brought the German economy into a state of complete frustration. On May 13, 1931, one of the largest banks, Creditanstalt, which carried out 70–80% of financial transactions in Austria, went bankrupt. A storm of financial crisis has captured Germany and Austria. German industry was curtailing, the budget deficit reached a huge amount, the number of unemployed increased. Seeing that the German economy was on the verge of collapse, Chancellor Brüning on June 6 turned to England with a message in which he pointed out the difficulty of paying reparations, but did not receive a satisfactory answer. The collapse of the German economy caused huge damage to the United States. In this regard, U.S. President Hoover announced on June 20 the postponement of repair payments for 1 year, the so-called Hoover moratorium. France tried to oppose Hoover, because the delay in payments undermined her position in Germany, but in the end on August 11 an agreement on a moratorium was signed by England, France, Japan, Italy and other states. However, on July 13, the second largest bank in Germany, Danit, ceased operations. The financial crisis deepened. In January 1932, Germany announced that it was unable to pay reparations. The Lausanne Conference on Reparations, which opened in June, discussed the problem of international debt in times of crisis and reduced reparation payments from Germany by 10% for Jung's plan. In essence, at this conference it was decided to stop the collection of reparations from it. England and France agreed with a similar proposal in the expectation that military debts to the United States would be removed from them. But America dispelled their illusions. Subsequently, however, the debt obligations of England and France in relation to the United States were forgotten. Thus the rod was eliminated. The financial crisis in Germany led to a crisis in England, which was somewhat behind in rebuilding its economy. England was involved in the mediation of loans. Short-term loans received from the U.S. and France, she provided in the form 67 long-term loans in Germany and Austria. Concerned that the financial crisis in Germany and Austria would spread to England, some powers, primarily France, began to seize their capital in London. In the summer of 1931, the withdrawal of foreign capital in England and the diversion of English currency reached particularly large proportions. In this situation, on September 21, the British government and the Bank of England decided to abolish the gold standard. The fall of the pound has had a huge impact on the whole world. India, Norway, Denmark, Japan and other countries have also abolished the gold standard. In April 1933, even America was forced to resort to this, which led to the collapse of the world money market. In turn, the collapse of the money market caused currency dumping. Each country increased duties to combat dumping. All this led to an intensification of the competition between the great powers. The latter had to somehow ensure their influence in the colonies and dependent countries, and by introducing high customs duties to prevent the penetration of goods of other states. On June 12, 1933, an international economic conference opened in London, which was attended by representatives of 66 countries. However, this conference ended in failure, which was due to contradictions between the great powers on the issue of military loans and foreign exchange agreements, which indicates how deep the economic crisis was. The conference only contributed to strengthening the trend towards the creation of economic blocs. Even at a conference in Ottawa, held in the summer of 1932, England decided to strengthen the union of all countries belonging to the British Empire, and to stop the import of foreign goods, thus striving to achieve the unity of its empire. In contrast, France, which retained a large gold reserve and became a kind of citadel of the gold standard, 68 made every effort to establish its financial dominance in Central and Eastern Europe. The United States sought to secure its influence in the countries of the Americas. Japan, Germany and other states began to create their own blocs. Thus, the world was divided into a number of blocs. However, the formation of one bloc required that the possibility of penetration of forces representing other blocs into it be excluded. But the blocs themselves had a tendency to expand, and this could not but cause a further aggravation of the contradictions between the imperialist powers. Threat of war. Since 1933, in the capitalist states of Europe and America, there has been a slight revival of production, which, however, has not turned into prosperity. The period of chronic depression has come. The political and economic contradictions of the great powers became more acute. At the same time, the revolutionary struggle of the working metropolises, as well as the peoples of the colonial countries, which bore the brunt of the economic crisis on their shoulders, was growing. In the same period, the country of socialism, the Soviet Union, which managed to get rid of economic crises, successfully fulfilled its first five-year plan. The potential development of the USSR was a mute threat to the capitalist states. The great powers, demanding an armed redistribution of the world, had to restrain the growth of revolutionary forces in their countries. Therefore, they embarked on an arms race. The military industry began to develop rapidly, the share of the military budget grew. Each of these powers sought to establish a political system that would suppress revolutionary forces and unleash a war. The most open form of such a system was fascism, which came to power in Japan, Germany and Italy. At the height of the economic crisis, Japan captured Manchuria. In Germany, 1969, the Nazis came to power, openly embarking on rearmament, and Italy captured Abyssinia. All these facts were the direct cause of the Second World War. Hitler. We have already said that the global economic crisis plunged Germany into the abyss of disasters. In 1931, the number of unemployed in this country exceeded 5 million, and in 1932 there were already more than 8 million. Working conditions for workers have worsened, and wages have been cut in half. This naturally led to the revolutionization of the masses. In the general election in 1928, the Communist Party of Germany received 3,260,000 votes, in 1934 600,000, and in 1932 about 6 million. The financial capital of Germany, which sought to maintain the dominant social system, saw only one way to overcome the revolutionary crisis: to put Hitler's Nazis in power, consolidating their forces at that time, and establish fascism in the country, a reactionary political system based on violence. In September 1932, the newspapers of the German monopolists launched a propaganda campaign, preaching that the Hitler movement was designed to save the rule of capital. In early January of the following year, a secret meeting was held between the former Reich Chancellor Papen and Hitler at the residence of the manager of the Rhine Bank. The meeting, which took place not without the participation of the cadets and capitalists representing Thyssen, ended with the formation of a coalition government led by Hitler on January 30, which included Nazis and right-wing nationalists. Hitler's rise to power, proclaiming totalitarianism in domestic politics and choosing chauvinism as the program of his foreign policy, meant that German society had lost all democratic freedoms, and this clearly testified to the growing threat of World War II. That the Hitler movement is designed to save the rule of capital. In early January of the following year, a secret meeting was held between the former Reich Chancellor Papen and Hitler at the residence of the manager of the Rhine Bank. The meeting, which took place not without the participation of the cadets and capitalists representing Thyssen, ended with the formation of a coalition government led by Hitler on January 30, which included Nazis and right-wing nationalists. Hitler's coming to power, proclaiming totalitarianism in domestic politics and choosing chauvinism as the program of his foreign policy, meant that German society had lost all democratic freedoms, and this clearly testified to the growing threat of World War II. That the Hitler movement is designed to save the rule of capital. In early January of the following year, a secret meeting was held between the former Reich Chancellor Papen and Hitler at the residence of the manager of the Rhine Bank. The conference, which took place not without the participation of the cadets and capitalists representing Thyssen, ended with the formation of a coalition government led by Hitler on January 30, which included Nazis and right-wing nationalists. Hitler's coming to power, proclaiming totalitarianism in domestic politics and choosing chauvinism as the program of his foreign policy, meant that German society had lost all democratic freedoms, and this clearly testified to the growing threat of World War II. In early January of the following year, a secret meeting was held between the former Reich Chancellor Papen and Hitler at the residence of the manager of the Rhine Bank. The conference, which took place not without the participation of the cadets and capitalists representing Thyssen, ended with the formation of a coalition government led by Hitler on January 30, which included Nazis and right-wing nationalists. Hitler's coming to power, proclaiming totalitarianism in domestic politics and choosing chauvinism as the program of his foreign policy, meant that German society had lost all democratic freedoms, and this clearly testified to the growing threat of World War II. In early January of the following year, a secret meeting was held between the former Reich Chancellor Papen and Hitler at the residence of the manager of the Rhine Bank. The conference, which took place not without the participation of the cadets and capitalists representing Thyssen, ended with the formation of a coalition government led by Hitler on January 30, which included Nazis and right-wing nationalists. Hitler's coming to power, proclaiming totalitarianism in domestic politics and choosing chauvinism as the program of his foreign policy, meant that German society had lost all democratic freedoms, and this clearly testified to the growing threat of World War II. That on January 30th a coalition government was formed led by Hitler, which included the Nazis and right-wing nationalists. Hitler's coming to power, proclaiming totalitarianism in domestic politics and choosing chauvinism as the program of his foreign policy, meant that German society had lost all democratic freedoms, and this clearly testified to the growing threat of World War II. That on January 30th a coalition government was formed led by Hitler, which included the Nazis and right-wing nationalists. Hitler's coming to power, proclaiming totalitarianism in domestic politics and choosing chauvinism as the program of his foreign policy, meant that German society had lost all democratic freedoms, and this clearly testified to the growing threat of World War II. Hitler's fascism was, of course, established in more than one day. There is no doubt that the capitalist 70 Germany's development after World War I itself prepared the rule of fascism. The German Revolution of 1918, which pushed Germany to conclude a truce, was supported by the powerful upsurge of the revolutionary movement of workers. But since this movement was led by the Social Democratic Party, which did not want the final victory of the revolution, it resulted only in a revolution in the city. The newly created German Republic, its symbol was the Weimar Constitution, which propaganda wrote of as the most democratic constitution at that time. On the one hand, established a parliamentary system and strengthened the political position of the workers, and on the other, retained reactionary forces to suspend the socialist revolution, and did nothing to abolish the semi-feudal Junker system of land ownership. The government has reduced the army, but its governing bodies have been fully preserved. In this case, it should be borne in mind that the great powers, concerned about German fieldwork, were clearly condescending in the issue of the army, which the German reaction took advantage of. The Versailles Conference established the responsibility of Germany for starting a war and determined sanctions against it, such as deprivation of colonies, reduction of territory, etc. In 1921, 132 billion gold marks were imposed on Germany. The indignation of the people against the peace treaty arose. For Germany, which, as a result of the defeat, stood on the eve of the economic and social collapse, the terms of the contract were too harsh. They put the country in the face of a national crisis. In 1923, France, under the pretext of Germany's failure to fulfill reparation obligations, occupied the Ruhr. This had a profound effect on the entire German economy. Production stagnation began, inflation quickly developed, caused by reparation payments and the excessive release of paper money during the war years. 71. The working people and middle classes of Germany were in an incredibly difficult situation. The brand depreciated so quickly that, as they say, during the payment of wages, the wives of the workers had to wait for their husbands at the factory gates, so that without losing a minute they would run to the bakeries. They said that during this period such episodes also took place. If it was required to send a telegram, the money to pay for it was brought in a wagon, and the children paid for the movie ticket not with money, but with a briquette of coal. The savings of the middle classes have come to an end. In the face of public discontent, political activity of both left and right elements intensified. The deepening crisis in Germany was a matter of concern for Britain and the United States, which did not count on the revolution of Germany, but on the fact that it would serve as a cordon against Soviet Russia. The pressing problem facing the great European powers and the United States at this time was the salvation of Germany, which was on the verge of disaster. But it took money. After the First World War, the United States almost did not interfere in relations between European states and did not even enter the League of Nations. However, this time they could not help but participate in the plans for the salvation of Germany. A special committee was set up to study reparations, chaired by U.S. Vice President Dawes. In May 1924, the so-called Dawes Plan was developed, which determined the most rational method of levying repair payments from Germany. Thanks to the Dawes Plan, some stabilization of the political and economic situation in the country began, but this concerned only the large German capitalists and the government. The burden on the shoulders of the people did not diminish. Moreover, inflation of 1923, which was the culmination of the crisis in Germany, created an extremely favorable environment for large capital. The growth of unemployment and the poverty of workers allowed large capitalists to relatively easily carry out measures to further worsen working conditions, and the ruin of medium and small enterprises opened the way for them to establish their monopoly domination. Using the support of monopoly capital, the government restrained the communist movement. In 1925, it placed in power the president of Hindenburg, who was known to the people as an unlucky commander who was endlessly defeated in the First World War. So the German government sought to extend its rule. In the field of foreign policy during the period of stabilization, German capitalism, relying on foreign capital, took steps to develop international cooperation, intending, however, at the first favorable opportunity to revive its imperialist traditions. When the German economy was restored, German capital began to show a tendency to advance to Central Europe, the Balkans and the Middle East, embarking on the path of competition with the great powers. There are plans for a secret increase in the army. At the same time, neither the ultranationalist groups of the Nazis, nor the reactionary organizations experienced the inconvenience of operating under the conditions of the Weimar Republic. The Nazi Party is the abbreviation of the National Socialist German Labour Party. Initially, it was one of the many nationalist groups that arose immediately after the First World War. The subsequent strengthening of the Nazi Party and its rise to power are largely due to the dexterity of Hitler as a conspirator and provocateur who joined the party in January 1919. Hitler himself in his book Mein Kampf talks about how powerless the Nazi Party was when he joined it. I still remember how at the beginning I delivered 80 invitations myself to the party congress. And so 73 the evening came. We were waiting for the people. An hour after the scheduled deadline, the chairman was to declare the congress open. Only 7 people gathered. There are 7 permanent people. On February 24, 1920, at the first mass congress of the party in Munich, the city where the main forces of the Nazis were concentrated, Hitler announced the program of the party of 25 points in which he clearly described the party platform. The main requirements of the program were as follows: the cancellation of the Treaty of Versailles, the creation of Great Germany, the return of the colonies, the liquidation of the parliament, the removal of Jews from public life. Along with this, other demands were put forward: confiscation of military profits, nationalization of trusts, redistribution of property of large landowners, etc. All these requirements contradicted one another. On the one hand, radical socialist slogans were put forward, and on the other, extreme nationalism was proclaimed, appealing to the national feelings of the Germans, who were experiencing a national catastrophe at that time, and intransigence towards foreign states. The entire Nazi program was designed to trick people into the side of the Nazi Party. The first to fall prey to demobilized soldiers, the unemployed, youth, women. Having received funds from the military, capitalists and the highest bureaucracy for the development of their movement, the Nazis launched widespread propaganda activities to strengthen the position of their party. For 60,000 stamps received from military circles, the Nazis in December of the same year purchased the newspaper Völkischer Beobachter and turned it into their own print media. In August 1921, under the leadership of Captain Ernst Röhm, the staff officer of the Bavarian Army Corps, Hitler assault detachments, the SA, were created. Nazi Party. The masses cannot clearly imagine where the enemy's mistake 74 ends and our righteousness begins. The masses believe that the proof of our innocence is a crushing attack, with which we attack the opponents. To represent separate, unconnected opponents as people of the same sort, it is easy to make weak, insecure people doubt their own position. Such was Hitler's credo in matters of propaganda. In November 1923, Hitler, having contacted some circles of the Bavarian reactionary government and the Reichswehr, raised a rebellion in Munich. But the rebellion ended in failure, and Hitler went to jail. In the prison cell, he had the idea to write the subsequently known book Mein Kampf. This book outlines Hitler's ideas and political views, and therefore it is of great importance for understanding the Nazis' domestic and foreign policies. In December 1924, Hitler was released from prison. At this time, Germany was undergoing a period of stabilization and Nazism was in a state of stagnation. But after the Nazi movement changed its course, focusing on creating a mass party, attracting youth to the side of Nazism, as well as parliamentary forms of struggle, numerous right-wing groups began to join it. Gradually, Nazism expanded its influence. In 1928, the Nazi Party already had 12 seats in parliament, and the number of its members exceeded 100,000 people. In 1929, a global economic crisis erupted. During this period, the rapid growth of Nazi forces was facilitated primarily by the middle classes, as well as some segments of the youth and the conservative peasantry, who opposed communism, but were at the same time hostile to capitalism. A large role in determining the positions of these strata of the population was also played by their disappointment in the Social Democratic Party. In the general election in September 1930, the Nazis held 107 of their deputies in parliament, taking second place among other political parties in the country. 75. There were a number of reasons why the Nazi Party managed to strengthen its influence among the masses in just 2.5 years. It is clear that the frustration and bitterness of the middle classes, which hit the economic crisis particularly hard, found a way out in Nazi propaganda. In Gres's novel The Last Citizen, one of the Nazi gatherings is told where the following statement could be heard: since 1918, you believed in today's world, in today's Europe. You signed that humiliating agreement. Believing in the justice of today's world, you have tarnished your honor. But now they're taking off your last shirt. What friends are you? Jews who have infiltrated the governments of all states want to tighten the noose around your neck. You are cleverly euthanized by such words alien to the German spirit as pacifism and humanism. No, it is precisely now that such concepts should be decisively cast aside. It is now necessary to destroy today's world. We do not believe in the justice of today's world. 10 years ago we were made the laughing stock of the whole globe. But now we are again throwing you in the face. Germany must become strong. Germany must again take up the sword. Only in this way will she gain respect. This can be easily understood if you remember especially significant success was achieved by the Nazis in rural areas of East and North Germany. So, in the elections of 1928 in East Prussia, they received 0.8% of the vote, and in 1930 21.5%. The Nazis also strengthened their influence in large cities and industrial areas of the country. In Hamburg, for example, the number of votes they received increased from 2.6% in 1928 to 19.2% in 1930. However, the Communist Party of Germany also made great strides. Disappointed in the Social Democratic Party and worried about the growing influence of the Nazis, the German workers began to provide more effective support to the Communists. 76 in central Germany, Upper Silesia, Berlin and other industrial regions of the country, the Communist Party has become a leading political force, far ahead of other German parties in this regard. In all subsequent elections, the number of votes cast for the Nazis and the Communist Party continued to increase, while the Catholic Center Party, the Social Democratic Party and other centrist groups, which were the backbone of the Weimar Republic, gradually turned into minority parties. Under these conditions, as a result of the activities of such representatives of financial capital as Schacht and others, the desire of financial capital to support the Nazi movement has become more and more distinct. The Reichswehr, cadets and other reactionary forces took an increasingly pro-Nazi position. Among those who openly loaned the Nazis money during the global economic crisis can be called the president of the Reichsbank Schacht, behind whom stood the industrial capital of the Rhine-Westphalian region, the largest steel tycoon Thyssen, coal king Ruhr Kerdorf and others. All of them represented the very bourgeoisie, which in their desire to contain the revolutionization of the working class had high hopes for the Nazis. In 1929, Kerdorf declared, "Now that the spirit of patriotism is almost completely broken, to be able to rally and attract like-minded nationalists to one's side means to show great faith in oneself." Having been honored to attend the Nazi Party Congress, despite my disagreement with certain points of the party's program, I acknowledge the importance of your movement for the revival of our homeland, Germany, and I cannot help but pray for its success. These words of Kerdorf with exhaustive clarity characterize the situation at that time. The number of members of the Nazi Party was growing rapidly. If in 1929 it had 176,000 members, in 1930 389,000, and in 1931 806,000, then in 1932 it already had 1 million members. 77.